Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and as per usual on these Tuesday videos, we have some spoilers for Campaign 3 of Critical Role. So if you aren't caught up with episode 107 or anything before that, I recommend getting caught up and then watching this video. So in episode 107 of Campaign 3, we actually had the return of Abu Bakr, one of the players from the Downfall miniseries they did, and he reprised his role as the Archart. He took the DM seat and had a nice little roleplay session with the Bell's Hells. This was really cool, it was really fun, and it showed us exactly the type of person that the Archart is. And that would be a massive, massive coward. But before I break that down and why I truly believe he is a massive coward, I want to talk about the way he was sort of introduced to the story. Because there seems to be a bit of discourse, and I mean not like a terrible amount of discourse around it, but I did see some comments both on my recap video and I've seen some people talk about it on Twitter, and some of them weren't necessarily too happy about the way he was introduced. Which was after, or because of the fight they had with Sora Lord Zethutha, Lewdness, and Gloomglut, the temple they were in, the Archart's temple, began to collapse, and the party had to try to make their way out before it collapsed on them. 3 people were still inside the collapsing temple when it finally did collapse, and that would be Breas, Imogen, and Sora Lord Zethutha. Now, when everything settled, the dust settled, and the rocks had fallen on these members of the party, the good old meme of rocks fall and you die, no one died. We cut inside the rubble, and Imogen and Breas are in this safe pocket inside this collapsed tunnel. And they realize that there's like magic surrounding it, and it's pulling away from them slowly, and then the temple begins to be rebuilt. Now, this was the Archart rebuilding his own temple. Now, a lot of people were a little upset by this, because that meant that the tension of the fight and the collapsing building happening wasn't real. Like, there was no real stake of this building falling on any of the players and killing them. Now, it might have been different if the enemy was still around, but there weren't many enemies still inside breathing who would be affected by this. So realistically, this made the whole fight with the temple collapsing feel kind of pointless, because the threat of the collapsing temple wasn't real, because they were just going to be saved anyway. So on the one hand, I'm not a big fan of this idea, because it does take away from that fight. It totally retroactively takes away from the fight, which I was actually enjoying. Apparently some people didn't enjoy this fight, which I can get to a certain extent, but I personally really enjoyed this fight. But this moment where the collapsing temple meant nothing kind of took it away from the fight. Like, the coolness factor for me was the risk of this building falling on top of everybody. And then once that tension was gone and there's no longer that threat, and we always knew there was no threat, it did kind of take away from the moment. However, there is a big however in this whole situation, and that is they're in the temple of the Archart, of Corellin himself, in his dimension. This is his realm, after all. They literally mentioned that a handful of times in the episode prior. This is his realm. He is deeply connected to this realm. So is the Moonweaver. The two of them are connected to this realm on a different level compared to other gods. So it makes a lot of sense that they would be able to do this. Not to mention, he has an agenda with this party in particular. So it makes a lot of sense, not to mention with the person who was squashed by the temple in particular. So he has a lot of reason to actually step in and save Imogen specifically, because that is his whole goal. He wants to talk to her and Fern, the 2 Ruidusborn. That is his entire thing, but we'll get into that in a moment. So I understand the idea that it's kind of sucks that this temple thing didn't mean anything, but at the same time, there's a lot of reasons to why it makes sense to why he would do this. So I'm sort of 50-50 on the idea, but I'm curious what other people think about this whole Deus Ex Machina thing, even though a literal god stepped in to do it. So I'm curious what people think about that. But now I'm going to finally talk about why I believe the Archart is a coward. And the reason I think he's a coward is because of what he asked the party to do. He asked the party to throw away the brilliant plan they currently have, which will give us dope-ass 1-shots or 2-shots with Vox Machina and the Mighty Nine, and instead he wants the party to not only abandon their plans with Vasselheim, Exandria, and all the armies they've gathered, he wants them to sneak into Khaviris, the city on Ruidus, again, which is already a pain in the ass to do with Keela's help, but now he wants them to do it without her help because, she won't be on board with this plan because she likes the current plan. And then he wants them to sneak to the Hollowed Cage, which is the surroundings of Predathos, and then use Imogen or Fern to sacrifice themselves and become the vessel so that they can become Ruidus and chase off the gods. Because Corellin, the Archart, is tired. He is tired of the perpetual cycle of rebellion from the mortals of Exandria, their children, the gods' children. He is tired of watching them rise up and then attempt to kill the gods in whatever fashion, and then the gods step in and smite them in the name of godlyhood. He is tired of watching this happen. He didn't like the calamity. He wasn't a big fan of what they were doing in Aor, and now the same thing is happening with Ludinus, and the gods are potentially stepping up to fight again in another calamity. The divine gate be damned, as far as some of them are concerned. They need to intervene, and they're just waiting for the moment that it makes more sense, where the people of Exandria won't be upset by this if they do. He wants the Bell's Hells to release Predathos before that moment can happen. He wants them to sneak up to Predathos, release it, sacrificing Imogen or Fern to do so. Corellon believes that the only way his children of Exandria can truly evolve and get to the next step is for the gods to not be there to intervene at a moment's notice if they have to. For the people to not have to rely on them and for them to sort of build themselves up and move forward without the gods. That is what he believes. He is tired that the gods are constantly standing in the way of progress. However, his ask comes at a very big price and with multiple unknowns. Not to mention, he's not willing to sacrifice his own people, but in the same breath, he's not going to warn a portion of his family of what he's doing. He's just going to do it and pray that they're able to run away. He is going to do it and leave first, making sure that he won't be the one eaten, but everyone else might get eaten in the process. Corellon is a coward for many, many reasons. Breus even asks, why doesn't he just sacrifice one of the gods? Why not take one of the gods to Predathos to satiate the hunger? Now, of course, Imogen does say that she doesn't think that'll be the entirety of his hunger pushed away, but Breus makes a good point. Why not sacrifice some of your kin? To which Corellon says, why would I sacrifice my family? As he's staring down a group of people, having just asked them to sacrifice one of two of their friends, one of two of their family. He asked them blatantly to make a sacrifice. They don't even know the outcome of what would happen if the sacrifice were to happen, if they were to become vessels. He doesn't have the answer for them. And he's asking them to make a sacrifice that he himself won't make. If that's not a coward, I don't know what else is. And instead of helping his brethren, instead of helping his kin, instead of helping the other gods, he is just going to flee. He and the one other god who agrees with him, by the way, one of the other gods agrees with him that this is a good idea. According to him, there is another god who is of the same sort of thought process as him. We don't know who that was yet, and I'm curious to find out who that is. But we don't know who that is quite now. But there are two gods currently who think the best option is to release Predathos and cut and run. And they're not going to tell the betrayer gods. They're not going to tell anyone else because the other gods might give them pushback and tell them that's a terrible plan. And then they might actually inform the armies of Vasselheim, hey, the Bell's Hells are considering this plan and you should tell them not to, or capture them because they probably could. So realistically, he isn't going to warn his family, putting them in risk, massive risk, if the Bell's Hells were to follow through on this. But he's not going to sit by and help them if Predathos catches them. His words were, you literally just have to move fast enough. You have to hope you're faster. What? That is the definition of a coward. To, instead of turn and fight and help the others, you're going to keep running. You're not going to stop and help. You're going to run. You're going to run and pray that this thing doesn't catch up to the rest of you. And if it does, well, I guess I was wrong, right? I guess my plan didn't work. Coward. So I feel like I've conveyed how I feel about Corellon's ask, about his plan, about everything he's been saying, and how I think it's terrible. There's too many unknowns compared to the other plan that the party currently have. The three-pronged attack is infinitely better because it involves a full-on assault in one place that'll draw people away from other defended places, which will allow the other two hidden teams to sneak in properly. If the Bell's Hells were to just try to sneak onto Khaviris as of right now, they're not getting 5 feet. Yes, they might make it to Khaviris, the city, but they're not going to make it very far inside Khaviris. They need other things to help them to make sure that that actually happens. So realistically, the plan of sneaking to the hollowed cage is a fucking horrible one. And it's just not going to work. They're not going to be able to get there. They needed Keyleth's help to get as far as they did when they were first traveling to Rudis when they had no information. They're going to get bombarded if they try to do anything else now without the help of people like Keyleth, Allura, anyone else like that. They need help at this moment. So for them to accept this plan in any form or fashion is a terrible idea. However, there seems to be a handful of the party members who kind of are on board with this idea. Specifically, Dorian, Ashton, and Imogen and Fern are sort of thinking about the idea. Now, as far as Imogen and Fern, I do truly believe that they're thinking about the idea because like the same sort of thing that FCG did, like making a sacrifice to protect their loved ones. And I think that is sort of what they're thinking right now. Like, is it possible that I could, free them of this massive Predathos problem? Will I be able to take on the power of Predathos and then leave with it? Will I be able to chase the gods with it and use the power properly to make sure that my friends aren't hurt? I think that is where Fern and Imogen are sort of coming from when they talk about this, or when they're sort of thinking about it. Like, could they control the power? Fern literally says, I think I can control the power, and Imogen is sort of on board of the idea of making that sacrifice. However, when it comes to Ashton and Dorian, they've made it very clear that they're not fans of the gods. And Dorian literally said, if I can make a deal with someone where I can release Predathos, get rid of the gods, and make sure my friends live a good life afterwards, then I'm on board with it. However, that is almost word for word. I'm paraphrasing a tiny bit. However, the issue with that is, and I feel like Dorian is forgetting this when that is being said, he won't have a life with one of his two friends if they go through with this. And I feel like that is a massive miscalculation on Dorian's part when he said that. Because he says, I want my friends to live a life after this. That's not possible if one of them make the sacrifice. And Ashton just seems on board because he hates the gods. So realistically, ever since he saw the downfall thing and he saw what Corellon was saying in the speakeasy about wanting to die, are they the problem? He's sort of been on board with talking to Corellon, and he wanted to talk to Corellon and see if he had an idea of what they could do to, potentially get rid of the gods, because he thought Corellon was on the same wavelength. And that is why I think Ashton is sort of on board with the plan. However, there are 3 people who are notably absent from this conversation. 4 specifically, I should say, not 3. Breus, because he's a follower of a god and he obviously doesn't want to get rid of the gods, specifically Asmodeus, and potentially even the Platinum Dragon now. He's sort of split between the two. And then obviously you have Aurum, who just doesn't want this to happen at all. Aurum literally gave, in my opinion, the best argument against releasing Predathos, and that is, Aurum said he steps on thousands of ants every day because they don't know they're there. And I thought that was the best counter argument to what Corellon was saying. Because Corellon said, oh, Predathos won't eat you, you're nothing to it. He wants my people. That alone, to me, says that this plan of Corellon's is a horrible one. He has no fucking idea about like 50% of the plan. And then he says that this thing just wants to kill my people. It won't kill you. You're not worth it to it. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know half of what he's saying. So why should they believe him saying that? So Aurum making that counterpoint to me was perfect. It was the perfect counterpoint. There was another thing that Imogen said that I thought would make me lean toward the idea of her not being on board, but she seemed to be on board by the end, which was, what about the people who rely on the gods? And Corellon simply said they will learn to and adapt to not rely on them, which is fair. I do believe that saying that is a fair point, but I don't know. That's a big ask to suddenly be like, okay, all these magical powers we've given you, like the divinity, the ability to resurrect people, the idea that you could heal people, we cure your diseases through magic, through us, through you. Yeah, that's gone. However, there are examples of people still using divinity magic through god uses. The 2 biggest examples that come to mind right away is Xerxes, who was literally like a paladin of the people. He wasn't a paladin of divinity. He was a paladin in a place that literally like shunned divinity, right? So he's like, you know what? Gods aren't important. I'm the paladin of the people. Through them, I channel my magic. That made a lot of sense. And then obviously there was Jester, who didn't have a god per se. She had the Traveler or Artagan. So realistically, it's possible for them to still have divinity, just not on the scale that they had before. And it wouldn't be the same. So yes, while divinity will still be there, they might still be able to resurrect people. They might still be able to heal people. It just won't be on the same scale. Not to mention losing that comfort of being able to pray to something that I know is there, right? It's not a fucking question of if religion is real in D&D. It's real. They know it's there. Exandria, the people of Exandria know that their gods are there. And for them to be able to pray at night for a good harvest, for, a healthy meal tomorrow, for a nice night of sleep or whatever, to find love, whatever the hell they're praying for when they do pray, the idea is they have that God to pray to. But if Corellan's, whole idea gets put through and the gods are chased off, that comfort goes away. So asking the people to learn and adapt to that seems insane. The idea of losing this massive thing of comfort, this massive thing that I know at my worst moments, I know that the gods are watching, so hopefully they help me out. Losing that could destroy a civilization. Let's be real here. There are civilizations built around divinity in the Exandrian world. So to have that get torn down, what would Vasselheim look like without gods? It's kind of interesting, now that I think about it. But my point was, Breas and Aurum, they're against it, obviously. Laudna made a very good point as well as to why they should be against the idea of allowing one of their friends to become the vessel of Predathos. She explained what it felt like to be a vessel for someone else, where the lines were blurred between Delilah and herself, and she couldn't tell where the one started and where the other ended, and how you're not sure who you are anymore after a certain point. Things are too blurry, things are too whatever. And she could barely control Delilah. Until now. She only just recently had a way to control Delilah. So frankly, what are they going to have to be able to control the power of Predathos? And I thought that was a very interesting point, because that was the big question. Can they control it? Will it be something they're able to actually do? Could they control the power of Predathos and actually chase off the gods, not kill any mortals in the process, potentially not even kill the gods in the process, just chase them off, which is what Corellan really wants. He wants all of his family to be chased off and not killed off. Good fucking luck with that one, dude. There is a very low chance of them being able to control the power. So realistically, it's just a bad plan. Not to mention, we don't even know if Fern can be a vessel. We know that Imogen is exalted. We know that she is very likely a very good candidate for it. Now, of course, Zethuda is still on this warpath that thinks that his bloodline can prove they're powerful, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if Fern, a non-exalted Ruidusborn, is capable of being the vessel, because everything up to this point in the campaign has said that the vessel needs to be exalted. So for me, Fern being able to do it is a very low chance. So there is one person of the Belt's House that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is Chetney Pockpy. And the reason that is because I don't think he made his opinion on this very clear yet. Everyone else sort of had like in my opinion, a clear like indication of where they were. Obviously, Ashton and Dorian seem to be on board with the idea because they hate the gods. Fern and Imogen are contemplating the idea because they're willing to sacrifice themselves to give everybody else on Exandria a good life. And then obviously Breas, Laudna, and Aurum are against the idea, and they made their points very clear. However, Chetney did not. Chetney asked questions, got vague answers back from Corellan, and that was basically it. But if I were to make an educated guess on where Chetney sits, is I'm guessing he's on the idea that this is not a good plan. This is his newfound family, and we know this. He loves these people and is willing to, step up to the plate for all of them. He's willing to do whatever it takes to help them, keep them all alive. He's willing to die for these people. And the idea of another person sacrificing themselves for him to be able to live a life where he only has 100 years left at best, to him probably won't sit well with him. The idea of losing someone who he loves in Imogen and Fern would probably crush him, especially because there's more than one option. They have multiple options in this moment to invade Predathos, or to invade Ruidus and to stop Predathos in the three-pronged attack is an option still. It's not an option. And not to mention, there are other gods who have already reached out to them and have offered help and asked for help to deal with Predathos in the way that they've already planned to deal with it, right? To do the three-pronged attack, they've already had other gods sort of reach out to them and say, hey, this is a good idea. So for me, and we've also had the Raven Queen reach out to Chetney a couple of times. I think he's been in every single interaction with the Raven Queen so far, and she has asked for help each time. So realistically to me, I think Chetney is going to be more on the board of, or on the side of let's not do this plan. We have a better option over here. We have a more understanding of what we're doing on this side. It's not a big question. We're not going to lose anybody, or at least we hopefully won't lose anybody, and we'll go down swinging. And I genuinely feel like that'll be more along the lines of where Chetney sits, as opposed to being like, oh yeah, sure, let's sacrifice one of my family. I don't think he's on board with that idea. But I'm curious as to what you all think. Do you think Karelin is a coward? Do you think he's got a good idea? Do you think it'd be better for them to continue down the path of doing the three-pronged attack with Vox Machina and the Mighty Nine? I much prefer that idea. Do you think they should keep going around to the gods, find out who the other god is? Should they rat Karelin out to the other gods? I honestly kind of hope they do. And I hope that the implication is, based on what happened with Laudna at the end of the episode, which was the Raven Queen reached out to her, I hope the Raven Queen was watching. And I hope the Raven Queen wasn't the other person going, hey, release Predathos, which I doubt based on everything that we've gotten up to this point. So I'm very curious as to what you all think of this idea. Do you think Karelin's a coward? What do you think of the plan overall? Do you prefer the three-pronged approach like I do? Let me know. I'm very curious. I will see you guys on Friday for the recap of episode 108. And until then, peace.